Liam never thought of his life as comfortable. He wasn't rich, he wasn't particularly successful, but he knew the routine. Wake up, check phone, go to work, come home, eat, scroll, sleep, repeat. It was predictable, and in some quiet way, that made it feel safe. There were no big risks, no big wins either. Just a life that hummed quietly in the background. No alarms, no crashes, just flatness. He'd tell himself he was tired, that he was waiting for the right moment. But the truth was simpler. He had built a life so familiar, it didn't ask anything of him anymore. And slowly, without noticing, that life began to shrink him. He stopped trying new things, stopped chasing the ideas he once felt passionate about. Conversations turned shallow. Days bled into each other. His dreams stayed dreams, safely tucked away in his mind, untouched and unchallenged. But it didn't feel dramatic. It felt quiet, like standing still while the world moved past you. He didn't feel lost. He felt paused. And that pause had lasted years. One evening, Liam sat at his desk, staring at the same screen he always did. The usual feed, the same jokes, the same faces. But something felt different this time. He wasn't bored. He was uncomfortable. Not because of what he was seeing, but because of what he wasn't doing. A voice, quiet but clear, rose inside him. You've been living the same day for years and calling it a life. He tried to dismiss it, opened a new tab, clicked around, searched for something mindless. But the feeling didn't go away. Instead, it deepened. He looked around his room. Everything in place, everything predictable, everything safe. And for the first time, it didn't feel comforting. It felt suffocating. He remembered an old notebook from college buried in a drawer. Pages filled with goals, visions, ideas. He found it, flipped through it. It felt like reading someone else's dreams. He closed the book and whispered to himself, "Where did that version of me go?" And just like that, the comfort he'd once protected started to feel like a cage. That night, Liam couldn't sleep. Not because something bad had happened, but because nothing ever did. He wasn't in pain, he wasn't in danger, but he also wasn't alive. He lay there thinking about all the chances he never took, the job he didn't apply for, the side project he never finished, the trip he kept postponing, the conversations he avoided. And for the first time, he saw the cost of his comfort. It hadn't protected him, it had robbed him of growth, of depth, of his own potential. He'd always said, "I'm fine." But now he saw what fine had really meant. Stuck, silent, small. He sat up in bed and wrote one sentence in his phone's notes app. "Staying safe has made me invisible to my own life." That line hit harder than anything else, because it was true. And once you name the truth, you can't unknow it. If this story feels a little too familiar, hit subscribe and turn on the bell, because staying safe might feel easy, but growth lives just outside that zone. The next morning, Liam woke up before his alarm. The world outside was still quiet, untouched. But inside him, something had shifted. He didn't grab his phone, didn't scroll. Instead, he walked to the mirror and looked at himself, not to fix his hair or check his skin, just to see. He looked older than the last time he really saw himself. Not in years, in where, in distance. He asked himself, if I don't change anything, will this be enough? And for the first time, the answer was clear. Number. It wasn't about chasing success or proving something to the world. It was about honoring the version of himself he once believed in. He didn't need to do something huge. He just needed to disrupt the cycle. So he did something small. He changed his route to work, turned off the radio, drove in silence. In that silence, He felt his thoughts without distraction. They weren't polished. They weren't profound. But they were his. And that was the first step out of comfort, choosing presence over autopilot. That small shift didn't change everything. It didn't erase the years he'd spent playing it safe, but it cracked something open. Each day after, Liam looked for small ways to stretch beyond the familiar, saying yes to things he usually ignored, asking deeper questions in conversations, sitting with discomfort instead of numbing it. He noticed how uncomfortable growth really was, not because it hurt, but because it asked him to show up without guarantees. One afternoon, he walked into a cafe he'd never tried, just to do something new. The barista asked, "First time here?" He smiled. "First time. Doing a lot of things lately." She laughed, but he meant it. Later that day, he opened that old college notebook again, the one filled with dreams. And this time, instead of just reading, he underlined one sentence: "Growth begins the moment comfort ends." He stared at it, not with regret, but with respect. Because now, he finally understood what those words required. Not courage in the loud, dramatic sense, but the kind that shows up quietly and keeps going. As the days passed, Liam didn't feel like a new person. He still had doubts, still craved the familiar at times, but now he could recognize the pull of comfort and choose differently. He started to see how comfort had never been the villain. It was just overused, a tool turned trap. Some days, he still wanted to scroll, to stay quiet, to play small. But instead of judging himself, he asked, "Is this keeping me safe or keeping me stuck?" That single question changed everything. One morning, while walking to work, he passed a small park he usually ignored. But that day, he sat on a bench. No reason, no plan, just to pause differently. He pulled out a pen and scribbled in the margin of his notebook, "This is what waking up feels like, soft, slow, and sacred." It wasn't a breakthrough. It wasn't a transformation. It was a presence, a return. Because for the first time in years, Liam wasn't running from discomfort. He was making space for it. And in that space, growth wasn't loud, but it was alive. People around Liam started to notice something different. Not in what he said, but in how he showed up. He asked deeper questions. He stayed longer in conversations. He said no when something didn't align, not out of rebellion, but out of respect for his energy. One coworker asked, "You doing okay lately? You seem quieter, but clearer." He nodded. "I stopped chasing ease," he said, "and started listening to what discomfort was trying to teach me." That response surprised even him, because it wasn't something he had planned to say. It was something he had become. He realized the real change hadn't been doing something new every day. It was doing the same things, but with awareness. He still had routines, still drank the same morning coffee, still went to the same job. But now, he wasn't asleep in his own life. He had woken up, not in one dramatic moment, but through dozens of tiny choices. And every time he stepped out of comfort, even a little, he stepped closer to himself. Weeks turned into quiet milestones. Liam didn't post about his growth. He didn't write long captions or share deep insights online. He just lived differently. And that difference didn't scream. It stayed. He started waking up before the world got loud. Not to hustle, but to be. To breathe before the distractions arrived. He kept returning to the same notebook, now dog-eared and scribbled. No longer a graveyard of forgotten goals, but a garden of ongoing ones. One page read, "Comfort is not the enemy. Staying there forever is." He smiled when he saw that line, because now he understood it fully, not just with his mind, but with his life. Growth wasn't about escaping ease forever. It was about knowing when to leave it, when to stretch, when to risk discomfort for the sake of alignment. Liam still loved peace, still valued rest. But now, he knew the difference between rest and retreat. And in that space, between who he was and who he was becoming, he no longer needed a wake-up call, because he was already awake.